I learned a huge amount about culture, about people in my career. It's a truism that a business is just a collection of people, and so quite often the success or failure of a business is down to that group.
Yeah. Right, let's get started. So, welcome to the first episode of Unicorns and Workhorses.
You forgot the name then, didn't you?
Yeah, totally did. Well, it's only been around for a day, so
Unicorns and Workhorses.
That's the one. I feel like there's like a comic book coming around here.
Absolutely.
Full of
Graphic novel. Yeah.
Touche. Yeah, hello, I'm Carl.
Hello, I'm Chris.
Nice to talk to you, Chris.
Nice to speak to you. Doesn't happen very often.
No, it doesn't. So what are we going to do today? So we're going to talk a little bit about how we've come around to Trove. We started this business called Trove. How we got to that place. A little bit about our history. Yep. We'll cover some of the. How many actual years have we known each other?
So you're 44, I'm 43, so I think we're 30.
Are you only 43?
Yeah, August.
Yeah.
We're 30 years nearly, aren't we?
Oh, God. Yeah, 30 years, there you go.
A long time.
We if you go back in time, we probably could be grandparents quite easily by now.
Absolutely.
Yes. We're not, fortunately, just to qualify, we're definitely not grandparents yet. So 30 odd years. So we'll cover not the whole 30-year history because that would probably take far too long.
Most of it's not relevant to business.
And entirely not relevant. But I think the interesting part is, why have we come together and why we've done this. And we'll cover a bit of, history and stories and where we've been and all of that kind of stuff, and how we got to this place. We'll crack on, shall we?
Yeah, and I guess a little bit around MENA, before MENA,
100%.
Yeah, that'll be good to talk about. I think for me, you finished the parent company, the new parent company of MENA, 6 months ago. October last year. I'm 3 or 4 weeks out.
Yeah.
An odd time to spend kind of 5 years of your life kind of really pushing hard for something and then almost being spat out the other end. And now is the time to reflect a bit on what the hell happened over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So a bit of catharsis for me,
Brilliant.
Selfishly.
Bit of therapy.
Bit of therapy to go through.
Excellent.
What exactly happened?
What did happen?
What did just happen? Yeah.
I mean, you're not looking quite as shell-shocked as you did when you left a couple of weeks ago.
No, I've had more sleep, and I feel like it's less of a fever dream than maybe it was. So I am getting some clarity, and so it feels really nice to go into Trove and I guess apply myself to the bit that I really loved, which was that early part of forming the business. But maybe
why do you love that then?
It's an interesting question, actually. So my career was lots of different businesses of many different shapes and sizes. So I worked for Asda, the supermarket. I worked for a car maker. I worked for an online travel agent. Businesses of varying different sizes.
Perfume shop,
fragrance shop.
A lot of jobs.
I've had a lot of jobs, and I've done a lot of things in what is called digital, I suppose, very broadly. Was called new media when I started. That's how old I am. My first couple of jobs were around new media. And I've managed to experience a lot of different businesses of a lot of different sizes. And without going too much into the MENA journey, I knew at the end of that I was kind of craving the beginning because I just think it's more creative, it's more fluid. I think there's more potential. There's, I'd say, less structure, but again, maybe we can come back to that because I'm quite a structured person in how I work.
Yes, you are.
But there's more infinite possibilities at that point, and it's more, for me, it's more exciting, and the pace is faster.
What is a creative thing?
I get bored easily, and I've realised that and tried to use that as a strength.
You have a lot of toys.
I have a lot of toys, and I move on from toys too much. there's something around the early kind of couple of years in a business where the roles are not that well refined, and they're not that distinct, and so by necessity you have to get involved in everything, lots of different areas of the business. And whilst there's lots of areas which I know I'm not good at and don't enjoy, there are lots of areas that I do. So yesterday I was updating the Trove website, which is just great. I know I'm not brilliant at it. I know I'm not the best copywriter in the world, but for where we are now, it's what I can do. It's great. And you'll go from that to this and doing podcasts, or you'll find yourself in a room with new startup or an entrepreneur who's got bags of energy. So that variety it works very well for me. I guess I get a lot of energy from it. The counter to that is working in businesses where there is a very set way of doing things, or a more rigid structure, especially if it's one that you don't necessarily believe in. I really find that challenging. I really find that difficult, and my motivation, you can see it kind of sap immediately when I'm in that place.
So my next question was going to be, so how did you get to that place that you knew that actually I've really got to believe in something?
What's interesting is Mina was a very kind of purpose-driven business. It was in green technology. The vision for the business was one of decarbonisation. And whilst that's important to me, I wouldn't necessarily have to work for a business with a green purpose. It just has to be a purpose I believe in. Or the role that I'm doing has to be something I believe in. And actually, in lots of jobs, that was mentoring and developing my team and supporting my team and making sure that they were successful. That gave me a lot of drive. I've worked for some founders who are very driven and very kind of have a very clear vision in their mind. And if you buy into that, it can be quite exhilarating, because the momentum that they have means that doors open and things are possible that aren't possible in a slow moving business. So I think it's around kind of clarity of purpose, probably. Being in a business where there's a really clear purpose means that everyone can be more effective, everyone can make a difference. And I suppose for me, when we go back to the idea of creativity, it's about being able to make a change. Come in on a Monday, leave on a Friday, and the world is different because you're able to move mountains, you're able to do things that in a slow-moving business you just can't do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think, with technology nowadays, that possibility is kind of endless, right?
Almost dauntingly so. Like what I find fascinating is thinking about, AI is the buzzword at the moment, but for good reason, right? What we're seeing in terms of technology is accelerating at such pace. If we'd have started Mina now, the way we'd approached it would have been entirely different.
Totally different.
And that's 5 years, which in the grand scheme of things is no time at all. I'm actually quite daunted by it, coming into it now and coming out of Mina and then saying, okay, what am we going to do next? What are we going to try and achieve? It's an area I don't know well enough, so it's kind of high on my agenda is making sure I understand that technology better, because it's got the potential to accelerate. In my mind, it's as significant as the advent of the internet, and we're both at that age where when we were kids, the internet was there but not very accessible, and by the time we left university, it was much more in everyone's day-to-day life. I think we're.
But even not that much. I was thinking about this the other day. Even when we were at uni, you go and use the computers. There was most of my mates did not have computers in their rooms. I didn't have a computer in my room. I didn't have a laptop till I left university and took out a graduate loan to go and buy one. But yeah, I set up my first email address. Rich Turnbull helped me set up my first email address in school. carlstanton@hotmail.com. That was it. And I still had it until I forgot the password and lost the account.
So don't email that.
Don't email. You're not going to go anywhere.
But I'm speaking as someone who my entire career was due to the internet.
Yes.
Like I started just at the right time.
Yeah.
I started within a couple of years of the job that I did actually being viable or even existing.
Yeah.
You know, so it feels like a big watershed for me, going from being a kid and having to go to internet cafes to access the internet through to university where you had an account and your first email address, and then being employed within it. But you know, that transition still happened over probably 10 years, maybe longer if you know, in terms of looking back at I think Google was 98, you know. AI, and I know AI has been around for a long time, but in terms of the impact on society, we're feeling over the last 12 months, it's so significant. And there's endless possibilities with it. It scares me a bit as a parent of two kids, you know, in terms of what's their working life going to be, what's their life going to be. But I'm still fascinated by the technology, and so it's that creativity, that ability to just look at everything and anything and say, actually, I can get involved in that, and I can learn, and I can apply myself in a creative way.
Let's come back to that impact on the kids, because I think it's a really interesting subject that I've been thinking about. I think it ties into what we're trying to do with Trove. But let's just dial back a little bit first. We've known each other for the best part of 30 years. But really, we knew each other in, you know, throughout high school, but we weren't really friends. I don't think.
Weren't that close.
Sixth form, were
Yeah, sixth form was the point where everyone kind of we had a friendship group that got close together.
I mean, I was better friends with your sister actually than you, because we used to play in band together, and she was first over, I was clarinet. We used to sit right next to each other. So I think it's funny going and looking back on that kind of history. But yeah, sixth form was kind of the time that we really, you know, got to become, you know, mates, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I go off to uni and it separates. And I think probably a few years after uni that we kind of connected again. We lived together for a while in Leeds.
Yeah. It's a good flat.
It was a very good flat. And then we kind of in and out, and out. And then I think we've been talking a lot more in the run up to Mina.
Yeah, I think so.
And you know, I think we were both aware about treading carefully with the idea of you coming on board. Because it can be I mean, any dynamic early in a business is you have to be very careful with, right? But even more so if you've been friends for a long time. And I can imagine, you know, founders as friends is a whole other thing as well. But no, like I think fortuitously we worked together at Mina and got to see different sides of each other, and actually got to see each other kind of doing the things that we're really good at professionally. And so after that, when you were kind of going off and doing coaching and mentoring and the work you've been doing with Trove, I kind of thought, actually that is exactly the kind of things that I want to do too. So.
Yeah, it was fascinating. And I think when I look back, you know, I go back to those sort of memories of A level, and we both did physics together, and we'd sit at the end of the table, and I was like, you know, proper at the time, like super academic. I mean, I've always kind of loved that. I remember you and Johnny sit there going, maybe it's like, no, it's like this, it's like this.
I did not get a good grade in my physics. I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't good.
It was, and then, you know, so that was kind of like because like school is a bit like work, right? You know, you're kind of in there and you're doing that, and then you've gone off and done, and you were far more driven and ambitious than I was, I think, in my career. I thought I had this path that I was on, you know, it was academic, I was going to become a doctor, and I was off. And then I was like, I don't want to do this. And then I just kind of floated along for like, I don't know, 15, 20 years. I mean, I had great fun, don't get me wrong, and I did some good stuff, and it's not like I did nothing, but you know, ended up in the drinks trade, the drinks industry, and the wine industry, and all of that. And, you know, sales was just the natural thing I fell into. It wasn't like I'm going to go and get a career in sales, which I think is ironic because most people don't think that they're going to go and get a career in sales.
No, probably not. No.
There's somebody, right? But most people don't, and that's where I fell into. So when we kind of got to Mina, it was because of that thing that I'd sort of naturally fallen into that was useful for your business that you'd started, but it wasn't necessarily the fact that, you know, my sales skills or my experience was going to add all that value to the business. There was more than that, wasn't it? Because when you were setting up, you were really really keen to get the right people on the bus, no matter, and then find that place, for them to sit afterwards.
I learned a huge amount about culture, about people in my career, and it's a truism, but a business is just a collection of people, and so quite often the success or failure of a business is down to that group, how they work together, and their background and their histories, and the leadership and the culture. So when we started MENA, it was second nature to me to try and build a high-performing team that was, I suppose, reflected my values as much as anything, and were collaborative and cared and trusted each other. And were treated like adults, but also were coached and mentored to succeed. And I think in the early days of a startup, as this idea, I guess, of square peg round hole, you don't really know the hole you're trying to fill. You don't really know what your ideal team is. So you have to, I guess, combine people together to make sure you've got broadly the skills and the values that you want to see. But job roles aren't well defined at the beginning. And people have to be flexible and fluid. And so I think there is a certain amount of bringing people in who are flexible, have a lot of different broad skills, lots of soft skills as well, emotional intelligence, and you work with them to better define the role that they want, and you work with them to, I guess, grow into the business as much as anything. And you saw it, I saw it. Most people within MENA, probably with the exception of Ash, our other co-founder, their roles change very significantly throughout that period of growth, because you have to. The challenge is finding people who are able to grow, and often that's people who are quite junior because they've got the world at their feet and they're open to lots of possibilities. But it also needs, I guess, more experienced people who have got the right attitude, who are excited by the idea of growing as their startup grows.
I think you're absolutely spot on with that, and it was really interesting for me. I mean, I was attracted to the kind of the area you were in. I'd been in wine for a long time, and it wasn't that I'd fallen out of love with wine. I still love wine, but I'd fallen out of love with the industry.
Yes.
And I didn't feel that. What was my purpose? Well, shifting booze to people. Maybe if I was, working in a vineyard or something, it'd be slightly different. I think if I was, my hands were a bit dirtier, but I'd lost that kind of, I really love getting up every morning and going out there and sort of making that difference. I didn't feel like I was making a difference. And then the MENA opportunity came up and I felt like, oh, here's an opportunity to actually make a difference. And the thing that was kind of driving me was like, I wanted to, when my daughters were older, and they said, well, what did you do, Dad? I said, well, I made a difference. Or, well, I shifted some good booze. And, shifting good booze was fun.
Yeah, and I think what your career before MENA did give you was energy in terms of people, because you're someone who gets energy by walking to a room.
Totally,
and all those people that you work with. So I guess that probably sustained you a lot, maybe even longer than it would have done if that wasn't part of the job.
I think so, and actually, on reflection to it, it's not necessarily walking into a room for me as such with people. It's, the team is massive.
The connection.
Yeah, the connection and the team, and being able to, going back to something you said, to help others, achieve. Some of the things I was most proud of during my time in that wine trade was, working with people who were junior or people who had not done stuff, or even when I was, junior in the roles, was actually training hospitality staff how to sell. And I loved that. Standing up in front of a crowd of people who didn't know the Scooby about wine and talking to them and getting a bit passionate about it and going, oh right, there. This is actually something that's quite cool. And I've always loved doing that. I probably should have gone on the stage at some point. I obviously love music and all that, but I probably should have been like an actor or something in a different life. But that coming into MENA, what I loved about it was that culture
Yes.
and that chance to make a difference and chance to help you guys, that founding team that you had, you, Andy, and Ash, building something that was really different.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and the way I kind of contextualize it in my head is moving from quite a rigid, structured career into something where there were no rules, and we were genuinely doing things for the first time that I'd ever done.
Yeah.
And that just felt exhilarating. That's what gives me my energy.
Yeah.
My energy is doing something new, doing things that haven't been done before.
Yeah.
The freedom to just go and do things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, when I would guess for a lot of people who are similar to me, who are in a kind of a career which is, I had a successful career. I progressed. Seniority. I got shares. On the face of it, very, very successful, but not something that I enjoyed day in, day out.
No.
And something that every so often the kind of the rigidness of where I was I just really struggled with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, when you start sort of delving into those things and those kind of outward expressions of success, a change. And it's a bit of a cliche, isn't it, right? Everyone comes to, what's your why? And I was just listening to that Simon Sinek podcast on high performance, brilliant, what's your why? But it's so true, and it really drives you forward. And I think people who understand that when they're younger are in an amazing space. I definitely didn't understand that till the last few years, or at least have a fairly better idea. I know that I've always had to have a purpose or had to feel like, and I know where I've got my energy from, but I've not vocalised it or felt that until the last few years.
Yeah, and a lot of my drive in my career was progression and money. I just wanted to kind of keep going, earn more, and get a better job title. And sometimes that served me very well, but sometimes it served me very badly. And I ended up in roles where maybe I wasn't particularly enjoying it, but I was there because there was a pay rise on offer.
Yeah.
I think on the flip side, though, I always worked hard. I always pushed. I always tried to keep getting better.
Yeah.
And
to your detriment sometimes.
Oh, completely. Yeah, absolutely. Like a number of points in my career where I've kind of just the level that I was pushing at wasn't sustainable. And interestingly, not at me.
What, you didn't work hard at me?
Didn't work hard. No.
Just having a laugh.
Yeah. But I think it's an interesting point, right? Because there's this idea that's quite prevalent in terms of hustle and grind.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's obviously incredibly difficult to start a business and push it forwards. But what people don't say is it's a lot more enjoyable than doing that same level of work for someone else.
Yes.
Because it's yours and you have freedom and you allow yourself to focus on those areas that you enjoy, and there's no rules and there's no boss. And it's a different kind of pressure, but I never got to the point with MENA where I was kind of sleepless nights and struggling, partly because of the team around me, partly because of the founding team, but partly because I just always felt more in control than working for someone else, doing those same things.
Yeah, and I think those hard days of work, are satisfying, because where you're. Let's be honest about that point. When you were talking about, you got behind the purpose and with the other founders, and very much yours and Ash's relationship was visionary, integrator, operator, but that vision was shared, and it was your vision too. Okay, Ash is the visionary person, but actually that vision was sculpted and crafted, and what you do very, very well is you interpret other people's ideas here and make them into reality. I mean, I was, say the Ash Whisperer, as you were.
I'm incredibly ambitious and very competitive, and I suspect when I speak to a lot of people, they don't necessarily see that from me. I can be quite low energy. But in the face of someone who is incredibly high energy and has got lots and lots of ideas, I'm a really calming influence, and that's useful for that. useful for that person, but it's also useful for the team around them. And I think people at Mina always knew that they could go to Ash for energy and excitement, and to kind of really motivate them, and they could come to me for pragmatism and I guess someone to lean on, I hope, and someone that they could go and understand how. But Ash would have an idea, or sometimes an idea together. Often Ash would come up with an idea. I would then say, okay, well, how do we win at that? We're going to win at it. We're going to push hard, and we're going to be successful. And this is how. And it's that piece where you're then able to say, right, this is what we do next week. This is what we do next month. This is where we'll be in the year. That brings me my energy. That's how I kind of get a lot of energy out of my day-to-day.
A funny thing with Ash, I feel like he loves to win as well. But I think for you, winning is often like, well, let's make sure we beat the competition.
Yeah, absolutely.
You look at the competition out there, like, how are we going to beat them? Ash is not necessarily about beating the competition.
No.
He just likes winning.
He just wants success.
He just wants success.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting, some of the conversations I'd have with Ash versus you. And I took, I was on a lot of calls with Ash. Obviously, we're both sort of externally facing. And Ash would just start talking about stuff, and I'd be like, oh, right, cool, we can mention this then, and he just throw it out there, because that's what he does. He just throws out ideas out and just sees what lands.
Ash's approach used to terrify me at the beginning of Mina. Like, we'd be sitting in early kind of calls and he would tell everyone everything else we were doing. And this was people who could quite easily have been competitors. So I learned a lot from that, because what that does is he's an open book, he's transparent, and people really engage with that. They work with him, and they reciprocate, and they respect what he's doing.
And because they read the NDAs and knew that they were pretty useless.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, but and there is a lesson for entrepreneurs in that, right?
Yes.
What I would now say to entrepreneurs is, you do need to shout far and wide about what it is you want to do, because most instances people won't copy it. They've got their own shit going on. They've got their own stuff they want to be doing, so they're not going to kind of go, oh, forget that, then I'm going to copy
over here.
I think the kind of the tactics side, though, was the thing that I probably enjoyed. I used to use an analogy that wasn't a very great analogy, but it was something along the lines of playing Football Manager, which is football strategy game.
Yeah.
And I always felt in the early days of Mina that it was like that. Like, I know the destination, I know what we've got to do. I'm going to try all the different tactics to get to that place. And I got real enjoyment in that, especially, again, maybe one of the things I haven't said about startups is the pace. You can throw things out there and you can test and learn and see. And you can double down on what works, and you can push to one side what doesn't, and that's tremendously freeing. And then you can very rapidly learn a huge amount. You can be successful very quickly if you listen, and if you look at the data well enough, and if you observe well enough what's going on. The dynamics of a founding team, not just the founders, but that early team. I think they probably have more to do with the success and failure of the business than anything else.
I think you're absolutely spot on. And the thing when I loved that, those early stages, it was just so much fun. Everyone was just, trying hard, getting out. Everyone was working really hard. They were out there doing their best. There were, ideas flying around. It was great. But also, there was always that, it was almost that huddle, that huddle at the end of the day. What can we do next? And it's exhilarating. But look, we'll talk loads more about Mina as we go through, because I think there's a huge amount of lessons to be learned. Some of the bad stuff that happened throughout that time as well. Bad, but some of the challenges that faced as a business. But we'll delve into that as we kind of go through this little bit of a series. But just talk to me a little bit about Trove, and what you want to get out of this now.
I had so I've been in my in and out period for a couple of years from Mina, which is pretty standard when you sell a business, and that kind of ebbed and flowed in terms of how busy that was. And there was a brief period where there was a lot, and so I started to get involved in things like University of Sheffield Enterprise program, which is around encouraging graduates and members of staff, anyone within the university, to start businesses. Sheffield Startup Meet, which meets once a month. So I started to get involved in that, because I thought, okay, I've enjoyed this process. I'd like to maybe look at doing this when I've finished. And this was about a year ago. I also became a director of a couple of organisations, non-profit organisations as well. What I suppose I realised during that brief launch, because everything picked up again and it was intense after that until the end, was, and I think I remember saying this to you, it just doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
Like speaking to people when they have that energy, and they have that desire and drive.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like work. And my, maybe there's some ego in this, but my experience was genuinely useful. Like people wanted to hear what I had to say. And I enjoy supporting people in that way. I never claim to know all the answers. I've gone through this journey once. And there are 1,000 different ways we could have done it. I know that's useful to people, and sometimes it's inspiring to people. Not that what we did is, particularly kind of once in a lifetime, but it certainly is. I think it's inspiring to know that this kind of thing can happen in Sheffield or in Leeds or in the north of England, because I don't think we get that message across very well. So I was cast a bit back then. And then coming and finishing a few weeks ago, knowing that you've been kind of working with startups and doing various bits with Trove over the last few months, the idea of being able to do this as kind of second career is very exciting. And it goes back to that idea of creativity. And I think creativity, mentoring people, supporting people. And I do think, if I hadn't have met Ash, I wouldn't have started a business. And that is, I don't know, I'm really interested in that as an idea, right? Because I was a kind of corporate career for years and years. Maybe I'd have gone to smaller and smaller businesses over time and got more and more involved. But at that point in my life, if I hadn't have met Ash, I wouldn't have started it. What's interesting is if he hadn't have met me, or certainly someone in my position, he also probably wouldn't start Mina at that point. So, and this is someone who started multiple businesses before. So timing is everything. But there is something for me about the idea that people who've got an idea, maybe they've been in the corporate world, maybe they're a graduate, but perhaps people have been working lots of different jobs and have always had ideas and maybe have that slight frustration about what their working life is like. I do want to speak to people like that and help them understand how it's possible and how they make that progression, because it's incredibly rewarding. Whether or not Mina succeeded or failed, it still would have been an incredibly rewarding experience, because of the amount you learn, you realise what you're capable of as a person, you realise the kind of joy in working with other people and you're all pulling in the same direction. So I want other people to have that experience, really. So Trove feels like a brilliant kind of way in which we can help startups, we can help entrepreneurs, we can help people who are thinking about taking that route. And also it's creative, and doing this, doing talks at events, I did Sheffield Startup Meet a couple of weeks ago. It's brilliant. It's brilliant to see people and meet people and talk about the kind of experience. So I'm very excited. I'm excited for the potential of what we have. And I also think, the two of us as people who've known each other a long time, worked with each other for a fair while, we're very kind of collaborative and I think complementary in terms of what our skills and experiences are. So I'm excited to see how that works out.
Go back to a workshop that we ran last week. Brilliant lady, Abby, and she's got this incredible idea. She's already run a business, she kind of knows the nuts and bolts. And what was brilliant about that session was just helping her to really get underneath the skin of it. I love that when I see people kind of, coming alive because they're like, oh yeah, and you can see them like literally sitting forward and doing that. And then you kind of cut through the noise and go, okay, well, actually, let's talk about how we're going to make this happen now. Okay, so let's look at these steps and let's break it down. And what we were able to do after that session was give her this thing that she walked away and said, I know what to do now.
Yes.
I can go and take this idea I've got, and I've got steps to get this started. And that was so powerful. And it was the reason why I found that really powerful was because, and this relates back to something we were talking about earlier on about kids and AI, right? The future of work is going to be completely different. Those corporate jobs, are they even going to exist? I don't know. the thing that doesn't change is human connection, and human creativity. And yes, AI will be able to create music and they'll be able to do all that. And maybe it'll be better than humans. I don't know, but I think if you remove that connection that humans have, that we've built up over hundreds of thousands of years. I have to check my history on that. 100,000 years. We built up over 100,000 years. You can't just remove that with a computer program overnight. I firmly believe that. So looking at my daughters now, they've got their passions and they're working out where they're going to go. Like particularly my eldest, she is obsessed with art. She draws all the time. She's just inspiring. She loves it. She gets so much energy from it. She can sit there for hours invested in that. Now, what's the best thing for me to help her to achieve her dreams and live her passions? Is it to go and go through university, then go and get yourself a corporate job? No, absolutely not. What's the best thing that I can possibly empower her to do is to learn to harness those skills and to be able to create a brand and a business around what she's doing that other people buy into as well. Yeah. And I think that's what I think so fascinating with what we can do with Trove, is helping people, realise some of those dreams.
I think there is a huge value and privilege in helping people to understand that something is possible. Yeah. Right? I was speaking the other day to Tom Wolfenden, who runs, amongst other things, Sheffield Technology Parks and the Cooper project, I think, incubated with there. And we were having this conversation about how often entrepreneurs come from backgrounds of where their parents are in business, in some kind of business. Yeah. Not necessarily that they ran kind of startups or huge businesses, but they might be self-employed plumbers or builders or
corner shop.
Yeah, or a market store, all those kind of things. Both my parents were in the NHS when I was growing up. There's no kind of business within there. Yeah. And so I do believe in the adage that you can't be what you can't see. I think you have to see people who've kind of demonstrated this stuff. And, it's a fine line. I don't want to play off the success of Mina for the rest of my life. No. But I also want to show people what's possible, and especially what's possible from someone with no kind of business experience at that level. Yeah. And I think, as you say, as the world changes, it's more and more important. Yeah. And I also think for my kids, I want them to see that, I've started a business, I've created something from nothing, and it's grown. And I think that for both of them, that really is in their head now, the idea that that's an opportunity where maybe when I was a kid, it just wasn't something I knew I could do.
No, exactly the same. I think, both my parents are teachers. That's the thing you go and do. You go to university, you get yourself a good degree, and then you go and find that job. And I was going to be a doctor, right? And thank God I didn't do that. But kudos to all the doctors out there. Amazing job. I'm just very glad I'm not one of you. I think that's hopefully a really solid, kind of place for us to be with Trove. Yeah. I think. Well, we'll see what happens, right? But I think we've got a lot of opportunity to get out there and hopefully do what we do well and drive people forward.
I think so, and I think what has been encouraging for me in a relatively short period of time of working with you on it is, we've had some sessions with various different people, and what inspires a lot of confidence in what we're doing for me is people can be at very different stages and backgrounds and experiences and personalities, but most people need some support at the beginning. Whether there's an experienced founder who's done it 5 or 6 times before, whether there's someone who has never started a business, the value in having that kind of sounding board early on is huge. And I definitely see Trove as that, as a really important sounding board. But hopefully one that adds momentum to where people are. So whether that is someone with just the early stage of an idea, or whether that's someone who's been running a business for a while. I think between the two of us, our skills and experiences are so varied, and our approach is, to borrow psychotherapy term, person-centred, i.e. we care about the individual and helping them to achieve. And it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's not one size fits all. No. do genuinely believe we can really help people to be successful, regardless of background, regardless of the status they're in with their business. And you know, selfishly, I can't wait to work with more and more people who are in that place, because that's what gives me energy.
Yeah, it's great.
And that's what I love doing. So yeah, I'm excited. Hopefully, it's the start of a very good journey over the next few years.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I think that'll probably wrap it up for the day, then, won't it?
Yeah.
So I think, do we have to do like and subscribe as well?
Oh God,
Obviously not.
I'm not. Can't do it. The fact that this might end up on TikTok is enough for me.
I mean, have you got a TikTok account?
I've not got a TikTok account.
No, I have. Don't get it.
No,
not there yet.
No, we're probably not meant to say that if we're going to be.
No, we're totally not.
Advice.
Yeah. But look, we're not doing social media advice here. Let's just qualify that. There are plenty of people out there who do amazing social media advice, and we will be passing their details on to you.
But we are going to speak with Ash.
Yes, we are going to speak with Ash.
Hopefully, Andy is technical.
Did you speak? Is he up for it?
Yeah, I haven't spoken to him.
I think it's definitely Andy. You're up for it, but
yeah, absolutely. And talk about those kind of very different roles in the business and some of their experiences. So,
yeah, should be fun.